Hello students, I am Raghavendra Kumar Singh, faculty of US Academy and Institute. We will discuss class 7th history's 5th chapter, rulers and kingdoms. The Qutub Minar is a 4-story high with a band of inscriptions in Arabic under its fort balcony. The first floor was constructed by Qutbuddin Aibak in 1199 and the rest by Iltutmish around 1229. Over the years it was damaged by lightning and earthquakes and repaired by Alauddin Khilji, Muhammad Tughlaq, Firuz Shah Tughlaq and Ibrahim Lodi. Between the 8th and 18th century, two kinds of structures built by kings and offices. Number 1, forts, places, garden, residence and tombs. Safe, protected and grandiose places of the rest in this world. Structures meant for public activity, including temples, mosques, tanks, wells, caravanserais, and bazaars. Kings were expected to care for subjects and hence by building structures for their use and comfort. They wanted to get praise for the people. Construction was mostly carried out by others including merchants, built temples, mosques and wells. Nevertheless, modernistic architecture, large mansion havelis of merchants survived only for the 18th century. Engineers' skills and construction monuments give insight into the technologies used for construction. Roof, for example, is manufactured by placing wooden beams or a slab of stones across 4 walls. However, to make a large room with elaborate superstructure requires more sophisticated skills. Between the 7th and the 10th century, architects added more rooms, doors and windows to build. For the building, roofs, doors and windows were made by placing a horizontal beam across 2 vertical columns, a style of architecture called tribete or corbelled, which was used in constructing temples, mosques, tombs, and in building attached to large stepped wells, means bailis, between 8th and 13th century. Or temples constructed in the early 11th century. Kings Dhanga Deva of the Chandela dynasty constructed the Kandriya Mahadeva temple dedicated to Shiva in 999. It had an ornamental gateway leading to an entrance and the main hall, Mahamandapa, where dances were performed. Image of the chief deity was kept in the main shrine, Garbhagriha, the place for ritual worship, where only the kings as immediate family and priest gathers. The Khajuraho complex contained royal temples where commoners were not allowed entry. The temples were decorated with elaborated carved sculptures. The Raja Rajeshwara temple at Tanjavur has the tallest shikhara among temples of its time. So, building it was not easy as there were no cranes in those days and it was too heavy to lift manually the 90-ton stone for the top of the shikhara. Hence the architects built an inclined path, not 2 steps, that started from 4 kilometers away to the top of the temple, placed the boulder on a roller and rolled it all the way to the top. The path was dismantled after the temple was constructed, but the residents of the area remembered the experience of the construction of the temple for a long time. Even now, a village near the temple is called Charapalam, the village of the incline. Two noticeable technologies and stylists developed for the 12th century. Architectural form called arcute, the weight of the superstructures above the door and window were sometimes carried by arches. High quality limestone cements mixed with stone chips hardened into concrete, increasingly used in construction, which helped to make the construction of large structures easier and faster. Now, building temples, mosques, and tanks. Temples and mosques, beautifully constructed, due to the reasons they were placed of worship, were also meant to demonstrate the power, wealth, and devotion of the patrons. For example, of Raja Rajeswara temple built by King Rajadeva for the worship of the god Raja Rajeshwaram. King took God's name as it was auspicious and wanted to appear his like a god via the ritual of worship. At the temple, one god Raja Rajadeva honored another Raja Rajeshwaram. Lord temples were all constructed by kings. Lesser deities in the temples were gods and goddesses of the allies and subordinates of the rulers. It was a miniature model of the world ruled by the king and his allies. Muslim sultans and Padshah did not claim to be incarnation of God Persian. Court Chronicles describes the Sultan as the shadow of God. An inscription in the Kuwaitul Islam Mosque, God chose Alauddin as a king. He had the quality of Moses and Solomon, the great lawgivers of the past. The greatest lawgiver and the architect God created the world out of chaos and introduced order and symmetry. With the advent of the dynasties, With the advent of the new dynasties to power, kings wanted to emphasize their moral right to be rulers. Buildings, places of worship helped rulers with the chance to proclaim a close relationship with God. Especially important in an age of rapid political changes, rulers offered patronage to the learned and peers tried to transform their capitals and cities into great cultural centers, brought fame to their rule and their rhyme, made precious water available by constructing tanks and reservoirs. Sultan Iltutmish constructed a large reservoir just outside Delhi e-Kulha and called the Hauzi Sultani or the King's Reservoir. Rulers often constructed tanks and reservoirs, big and small, for use by ordinary peoples. Sometimes these tanks and reservoirs were part of a temple, mosque, or a gurudwara, a place of worship and congregation of Sikhs. Where the temples targeted. Why the temples targeted? Since temples were built to demonstrate a king's devotion to God and their power and wealth. When they attacked one another kingdom, they often targeted these buildings. Early 19th century Pandyan king Sri Mara Srivallabha invaded Sri Lanka and defeated King Sena 1 831 to 851. According to the Buddhist monk and chronicler Dhammakiti, he removed all the valuables, the statues of Buddha made entirely of the gold in the jewel palace, and the golden image in the various monasteries. All these he seized. In order to avenge these blow to the pride of the Sinhalese ruler, the next Sinhalese ruler, Sena II, ordered his general to invade Madurai, the capital of Pandyas. The expedition made a special effort to find and restore an gold statue of the Buddha. Early 11th century Chola king Rajendra I built a Shiv temple in his capital, filled it with prized statues seized from defeated rulers. The list included a sun pedestal from the Chalukyas, a Ganesha statue, and several statues of Durga. A Nandi statue from the eastern Chalukyas, an image of Bhairava, a form of Shiva, and Bhairavi from the Kalingas of Odisha, and a Kali statue from the Palas of Bengal. Sultan Mahmud of Ghazni, contemporary of Rajendra I, attacked the temple or defeated kingdom, looted their wealth and idols, not a very important ruler at that time, by destroying temples, especially the one at Somnath, one credited as a great hero of Islam. Now, gardens, tombs, and forts. The Mughal architecture was complex. Babur, Humayun, Akbar, Jahangir, and especially Shah Jahan, personally interested in literature, arts, and architecture. Babur describes his interest in planning and laying out formal gardens placed within rectangular walled enclosures and divided into four quarters by artificial channels. Garden called Char Bagh, four gardens, because of their symmetrical division into quarters. Akbar, Jahangir, and Shah Jahan built some beautiful Char Bagh in Kashmir, Agra, Delhi. Architectural innovation during Akbar's reign, architect turned to the tombs of Central Asian ancestors, Taimur, for the inspiration. Central towering dome and the tall gateway, Pistak, important aspects of Mughal architecture, visible in Humayun tomb placed in the center of the huge formal Char Bagh, built in the tradition known as Eight Paradises or Hasht Behist, a central hall surrounded by 8 rooms, constructed with red sandstones, edges with white marbles during Shah Jahan's reign. Different elements of Mughal architecture was fused in grand harmonious synthesis. His reign witnessed huge amount of construction in Agra and Delhi, ceremonial halls of public and private audience. Diwan-e Khas Awam was carefully planned, located within a large courtyard. These courts were described as Chihil Sultan or 40 pillars halls. Shah Jahan audience hall resembles a mosque pedestal where his throne was placed, was described as a Qibla, the direction faced by Muslims at prayer, since everybody faced that direction when the court was in session. Architectural features suggest the idea of kings as a representative of God. On earth connection between royal justice and the imperial court emphasizes by Shah Jahan in his new constructed court in the Red Fort at Delhi. Behind emperor's throne was a series of Petra Dura inlays that depict the legendary Greek god Orpheus playing the lute, belief in that Orpheus' music could calm ferocious beasts until they coexisted together peaceably. Shah Jahan audience halls aimed to communicate that the king's justice would treat the high and the low as equal, creating a world where all could live together in harmony. Shah Jahan's capital was Agra, nobility and homes amidst formal gardens built in a charbagh format, also known as a riverfront garden. Shah Jahan adopted the river from garden in the layout of the Taj Mahal. White marbles mausoleum was placed on a terrace by the edge of the river, and the garden was to its south. Shah Jahan develops these architectural forms as a means to control the access that nobles had to the river. In the new city of Shahjahanabad, constructed in Delhi, the imperial palace commanded the river front, and only especially favored nobles like his eldest son Dara Sukho were given access to the river. All others had to construct their homes in the city away from the river Yamuna. Now region and empire. Between 8th and 18th century, constructed activity increased rise in sharing of ideas across regions, tradition of one region adopted by another. Example, in Vijayanagara, the elephant stables of the rulers were strongly influenced by the style of architecture found in the adjoining sultanates of Bijapur and Golconda in the Vrindavan near Mathura. Temples were constructed in architectural styles that were very similar to the Mughal palaces in Fatehpur Sikri in Bengal. Local rulers had developed a roof that was designed to resemble a thatched hut. Mughal liked this bungalow dome and adopted this to their architecture. Many buildings in Akbar's capital at Fatehpur Sikri. Follow architectural styles of Gujarat and Malwa. Authority of the Mughal rulers waned in the 18th century, but the architectural style developed under their patronage were constantly used and adopted by other rulers whenever they tried to establish their own kingdom.